Welcome back, everybody. This is Apocalypse Doc, your doctor in the apocalypse. And I have for you another Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. Today, we're going to expand upon the damage system we created last time, and we're going to make a screen on the HUD that flashes red when the player takes damage. So let's get started. So we're in our tutorial folder. We're going to go into the HUD folder, open up the main HUD widget, and then we're going to add an image. Go ahead and drag this onto the canvas, and I'm going to rename this image Damage Screen. And make sure it's a variable, make sure that's checked. Go ahead and select the damage screen image. Go over to the right to anchors. Select the anchor onto the entire screen. Then go to the offset right and bottom and set those to 0. And now let's change the color. Alright, so we'll just change it to a nice red. Scroll down on the right, go to render opacity and make that 0. And for visibility, we don't want the player's mouse cursor to be able to interact with this. So we're going to select non-hit testable. So go down to animation, add an animation, and let's call this damage flash. We're going to add a track, select your damage screen, go over to the right here, add a track for render opacity. The first keyframe we want, when the damage animation plays, we want this to be visible. So let's set the render opacity to something like 0.4. And we want this animation to flicker, okay? So let's go to 0.25 seconds and let's set that render opacity to 0.2. Oops. There we go. And now let's go back to 0.5 seconds and set the render opacity to 0.4 again. 0.4, and don't forget to hit enter. All right, and then we're going to want this to fade out. So let's go all the way over to 1 second and set the render opacity back to 0. Now let's see what that looks like. Let's hit play. That looks pretty good. So now let's create a function on this main HUD widget that can be called when the player takes damage. Type custom event. And we'll call this play damage flash. Go to the left, drag the flash out, get damage flash, and type play animation. So here's our custom event, play damage flash. We want the main HUD widget to listen out and play this when the player is taking damage. So how do we do that? One way we can do that is by creating an event dispatcher in the third-person character. So let's do that. Go over to the left, hit plus for event dispatchers, and type is taking damage. Compile and save. All right. So let's go back to our main HUD, and on event construct, we need to get a reference to our player character. So hold S, left click, and let's get a sequence node, because we're going to want to get a variable. Right click, type Get Player Character. And we're going to cast to the third person character. Connect the execution pins. Promote this to a variable. Third person character ref. Compile and save. And we don't want to ever edit that. So let's go ahead and create a category for do not edit. Compile and save. So when the main HUD gets created, this is going to run only one time. Remember, we don't want to keep casting. It's very expensive. So we're going to now have a reference to use from here on out to the third person character. So let's move this up. Let's grab our third person character reference, hold Control, drag it into the graph, right click, let's make this a validated get. And we are going to want to bind this event right here, our damage flash, to the event dispatcher is taking damage. So let's do that. Drag this pin out, type bind to, let's see, there we go, bind to is taking damage, and let's connect this event. Compile and save. So our main HUD is now listening for whoever is going to call out and say the player is taking damage. When that happens, this animation is going to play. Let's close this. Back to our third person character, we need to add this call out for when the player is taking damage. So we can add it to a lot of different places. We can call it out right here on our event any damage, okay? We can also go to our stat system component. We can go to our decrease health function that we created. And whenever the health is decreased successfully, we can call out is taking damage. So let's get our reference to the player character. We've got our first person character reference. We need to make sure we have a third person character reference. So let's make that right here. Let's move these pins down, hold Control, and you can drag the pins down. All right, and let's copy this. Remember, this is our owning character reference. So the owner of this component, cast to a character, owning character reference. And instead of casting to first person character, we're going to cast to the third person character. And we're going to promote this to a variable. Compile and save. There we go. So let's go back to our decrease health function and let's call out is taking damage. So let's move our third person character reference into the do not edit section, drag it into the graph, make this a validated get, and now we're going to drag this pin out and type call is taking damage. So this is going to alert any other actor that's listening that the player is taking damage. Let's copy this and paste it down here as well. All right. So let's see if this works. If you remember last time, we created a little debug so that when we push P, we're going to apply damage. When that happens, we should see the damage flash on the screen. Let's open up our third person map. All right. Now let's push play, push P, and there you go. Whenever we're losing health, you can see that in the top left, our little damage flash plays. Alright, and that's all it takes in order to show a red damage flash on the screen whenever the player is taking damage. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, go ahead and give me a like. It really helps me out in the algorithm. I really appreciate this. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe, and there'll be more to come. Have a nice day.